Welcome to the MyPersonalFootballCoach.com Youth Soccer Player Development Podcast, Episode 13, Ask the Experts with Danny Buck.
Welcome to MyPersonalFootballCoach.com Soccer Player Development Podcast. Discover all the secrets, hints and tips about soccer player development and soccer coaching from some of the leading figures in world soccer. Here's your host, Saul Isaacson-Hurst.
Hi guys, welcome back to another show. This is the first of two of our podcast specials, Ask the Experts. So first of all, thanks everyone who took the time to email me all those questions, and the guys who took time on Twitter. We unfortunately didn't get a chance to go through all the questions, but we got through quite a lot. Unfortunately, Ryan Hall couldn't join us for this episode. He had a bit of a family emergency turn up, so couldn't make it. So just myself and Bucky, Danny Buck, who's got over 20 years experience working in Premier League Academy football. So hopefully all you guys get lots of value from it. I certainly got lots of value from it as well. And as I said, the first of two. So in the next week or so, we'll have the 12 to 18s with Danny Saul and Mickey Beale coming out as well. So I hope you enjoy this one. It really is very interesting. All go on the My Personal Football Coach front. We're talking to a couple of pro clubs who are interested in using our online training program as a homework portal for their players, and several clubs also in North America who are looking to add value to their membership and support their players' technical development with our online homework program, the Dynamic Ball Mastery program. So lots going on, all is well. And without further ado, let's get into the show. So Danny Buck, welcome to the show.
Hi, Saul.
Thanks for taking time out for this. I know you've got a busy schedule, mate.
It's a pleasure. No problem at all.
So as you know, we asked all the listeners, as it were, to send their questions in. They've sent lots of questions in, so we'll just work through these questions one by one, and we'll sort of discuss each one and their merits, as it were. So first one up. In Australia, the faster, more physical players are viewed in better esteem than players with less speed but more technical ability, even at the skill acquisition stages between 9 and 12. What is your opinion on this, and how is it viewed in Europe?
I mean, I think where you say how it's viewed in Europe, I think teams have a very different view to perhaps maybe what my view is. And I think what experience tells you is that you can't always go down one road. You can't say you're going to go with lots of quick players or lots of physically good players or lots of technical. You've got to have a bit of a balance, because a lot of the potentially smaller players that might not move quite as well in a straight line might move quite well sideways and backwards, which is just as important in the modern game, depending on the position you're playing. So I think people are still a little bit safe. They will look at results, and sometimes these smaller, less impact type players in a massive game situation might not quite produce what the kind of first eye will see, whether they're really dominating a game. But when you really look at what the players are trying to do, are they technically doing things in the right way, and can you be patient enough to wait and see how they can compete on a level playing fields with boys physically the same maturation as them.
So I've got a question for you then, in that terms of in your experience in academy football, would you say that the tendency has been, if you're looking across the academy landscape, for a big emphasis on the big physical player, big quick boys, big physical lads?
Definitely. And I was having this conversation with someone the other day, actually. When I think of all the players that I've taken, whether they were nines, whatever, how many of the big physical players that dominated the game through their physicalities have actually gone through and produced, been able to sustain a career at, I would say, the top three divisions. I can name a handful, tops. The boys that have gone through are boys that have had to find other ways, who are perhaps a little bit smaller, not quite as quick, didn't dominate the games quite as much through their physical attributes, are the players that have come through the system. But I still see, we've played teams at under 8 this year that, are still going down the big players that technically are a long way behind some of the smaller players, and I just don't think people are learning, to be quite honest with you, which is a bit of a shame to see.
So do you think there's been a change from when you first went into academy football and looking to now, or is it just still the same, pretty much a blanket or big physical lads, just runners?
I don't think it's changed. I think the odd club has tried to do what it can do. The likes of Tottenham, us at Arsenal, the younger ages and what have you. And they're the kind of clubs that are trying to change it, but I still see clubs are so safe in how they play, and it looks like people are worried to lose. And I think you just got to forget the result. Do what you can for the boys, want them to win, want them to have a desire to win, but in the right fashion. There's no point winning if it's to the detriment of the players' development. And going back to the question about people fancying boys that might move a bit better at this age. And when I say move, the dynamic ability of, as I say, moving sideways and back is absolutely vital, and that needs to be looked at. But if one boy can run faster in a straight line than another boy, that doesn't mean that boy that's faster is going to be a better player come 16, 17 years of age. And my experience is they don't become better players.
Also, from my experience as well, the bane of my life when a recruitment officer tells me that an under 9 is one paced, or an under 8 can't get around the pitch enough. Famous story. One of my colleagues say, I don't know if you know Rayan, the kid who plays for Anderlecht, one of the best players in the world at the moment. He actually said he didn't think he could get around the pitch enough. But that's sort of still the mentality of a lot of recruitment staff. Was that a case of maybe teaching old dogs new tricks or something like that?
I don't know. I think until coaches, academy directors, recruitment staff, we all lose our ego a little bit about maybe not getting the result on Sunday or Saturday. I think it's going to be difficult. There's people like Harry Winks. Harry Winks, people said, couldn't move properly. Josh Onomar couldn't move properly. Marcus Edwards couldn't move properly. Jack Wilshere.
Harry Kane.
Yeah, and Alex Iwobi. I remember, people saying he can't move. I think, it's probably, one of the biggest fallacies in the game. I think as long as they are bright, willing to learn, can technically improve, and as I say, moving sideways for me is more important in the majority of the positions moving forward. Listen, a player that's got extreme pace is someone that you should always work with, particularly if you get them at a younger age, but you can't have a team of them because that doesn't work. There are, specialists. If you get Aaron Lennon at 8 and you can work with him, who knows what you could achieve. Theo Walcott the same, making them better. But, it can't be the norm.
Okay, so moving on to the next question. I recently took my kids to a trial, under 9, under 10 level for a football school academy. Unfortunately, the selector did not pick them, and in discussions did tell me that they had great technical ability but lacked quick decision-making skills when on the ball. My question is this more important at the young age, or does it come during their teen years? And also, how can you teach kids to have quicker decision-making skills at this age?
I think decision-making is absolutely vital, but the caveat I would put on that is that you have to know what you're looking for, because you might see a boy that gives the ball away 3 times, but it could be that the fact that other people aren't making the runs of the intelligence level that the boy's operating at. Decision making is a very difficult one, and you need to take it in the context of who they're playing with, the situation they're in, and I think it's something that players can develop. You've got to have good decision making, players that can see stuff. But I've had a player this year that at the beginning of the season could really only play at the back of the pitch, so we pushed him, played him in the middle of the pitch to try and get it around him, try to make better decisions. And the improvement he's shown has been enormous. Josh Onomar is another good example of that, where he predominantly played as a number 9 until we came into his under 12 season, and then we played him as an 8 and got him in the middle of the pitch to get stuff around him a little bit more, because his decision making at times wasn't quite where we wanted to be, and he developed. So I think seeing a player for a couple of sessions saying their decision making is poor, I'm not sure you can actually do that. I think you need to see them for a period of time. I think you need to take into the context of what they've got around them, and you've got to make sure you're absolutely sure with kind of making a call like that, because it's got a lot of variables.
I suppose it's also as a coach what you're looking for, right? So if you have a young kid who's likes to dribble but keeps giving it away, and then if in terms of do you want a pretty game of football, you want the boys to move it quick, or do you want people to try and try skills and do that sort of thing as well?
Exactly right, and it depends on the player you've got. Josh Bowie, who's at Man United, was with us at Brentford, and I didn't want him to pass too much. I told him when he got 1v1 out wide, I wanted him to try and dominate. However big and physical the other player was, I wanted him to find a way around him. And if he lost the ball, I told him that was on me. He had to try and find a way to get around players in those situations. And I think you've got to know your players. Josh then was an under 15, very different to when you're taking an under 9. And it just depends how you're trying to educate your players. But the last thing you want is players to be safe. The more risky they are, the more creative they are. You only have to see the other night the difference between the English side and the Spanish side. The creativity difference is enormous, and that doesn't happen by accident. There's no way that both of those teams have had the same education, the players, all the way through. They've obviously been allowed to be a bit more free and make a lot of mistakes. You can't play passes like someone like Christian Eriksen without making a hell of a lot of mistakes along the way.
And what's your thoughts then also then from coaching from the sideline? I'm just digressing a little bit. You talk about letting kids make decisions and make mistakes. What's your thoughts on coaches being vocal on the sideline? When's it a good idea? When's it a bad idea?
It's a balance. I mean, I'm quite a vocal coach, and I think players need help at times. As I've said before, Saul, you know my feelings on let the game be the teacher. I'm just not a huge believer in that at all. I think players need help, but they also need to be left to make their decisions as well. And it's striking that balance. And different players have different needs, different situations have different needs. And I think how you can't be the loud, screamy guy, but you also can't be the mute on the sideline. You have to show a balance. And I think, speaking to a lot of players now who are in their mid-20s that I might have taken at 9 and 10, a lot of them say they really, really found it helpful that I would talk to them during the game and help them during the game. And they said they found it very hard when, people didn't do that because there were situations where they were trying things, it wouldn't work, and they just needed help. And you have to balance that needed help. No way should you be commentating through the game and pass, run, do this. It's more let them do it, see how they get on, then give them a little bit of help for me.
I think that's the issue, isn't it? My issue is when I see coaches who are screaming, like you say, turn it, pass it, switch it, he's open, almost playing the game for the players. That really does take away any sorts of decision-making skills, ability from the players. I had a good thing I picked up recently. What I've been using the last season, I was in academy football, which is trying to avoid talking to the attackers when in possession, and then avoid talking to the defenders when out of possession. So just thinking about when and where to give the information and sort of less is more type thing.
Yeah, I think so. And what you said there, Saul's not a bad idea. And I think the difference is when you start maybe at 9 and 10, I agree. At 15, 16, when you're out of possession, say the opposition goalkeeper's taking a goal kick, and you see that your back four isn't quite in the right line or something, you might say to your centre half, where should you be? Do you think that's right? And I think it's the more challenging questions there. But as you say, with the younger age groups, let them do it, see what develops, and then have the conversation with them afterwards about whether that was good, bad, or indifferent.
Okay, next question. So here we go. At some high-profile clubs, it appears from the outside that foundation phase players are expected to have an intense focus about their work in training from the pre-academy all the way through to the under-11s and beyond. As a result, some clubs appear to create players who can maintain their focus and intensity and gains very well over 3 to 4 periods of football. It appeared that Brentford also opted this demanding approach in recent seasons and produced young players with similar psychological qualities. So obviously that's over to you, Bucky.
Well, for me, intensity is absolutely everything. You have to show them what you need them to do, whether that's tactical, technical, or whatever. But the mantra at Brentford was, when you're on that pitch, you're working hard. And, we were big believers in without the ball, how we pressed, what we did. With the ball, we're dynamic, people ran forward, and it had to be 100% effort. And to be fair, it's funny that question actually, because there was a lot of comments that, when we were playing abroad and that. And I remember when we played Barcelona with the 15-16s, the Barcelona guys said they've never seen players with the energy levels. Very few times they've played against anyone with the energy levels that we've got. And we were 1-0 up for the first half hour, and it really did catch them by surprise. And I think, from 8s all the way up to our under-21s when John was in charge of them, that was the mantra of the club. And, you know, for me, there's no point a player being able to do a skill, a pass, whatever, you know, under a nice, slow, easy pressure if they cannot do it at extreme tempo. You've got to balance it, because sometimes if everything's really tight and everything's crazy 300 mile an hour, then people can be guessing and just playing one touch. You've got to balance it. But, you know, we trained harder than, you know, at a higher tempo than we played in our matches. And I think that bore some fruit. And certainly that's what we've taken into this season with the youngsters at Arsenal as well.
I think there's the, from my point of view, there's like maybe a misconception as well. People think, you know, because the foundation phase, it's, you know, turn up, bit fluffy, everyone's, you know, kick a ball around, go outside the pitch, write something on the blackboard, come back out and do another thing. You know, because I remember I was going to write a blog for another organisation, and the guy questioned, I was talking about the importance of high intensity ball mastery at the foundation phase. He said, well, high intensity with under 8s, you know, as if that's something ridiculous. I said, of course. Well, look, these are still, you know, young, gifted and talented players, and you've got to try and, have some, you've got to challenge them in any way that is, even at 8s and 9s. And I think that's where the misconception comes. Maybe people not used to working with younger elite players. We're talking about, you know, the outliers at the, you know, the better clubs who really do need challenging. They need to train in an intense environment, you know, to really challenge them and get the best out of them. And I think that's maybe where, you know, misconceptions or, you know, something, you know, maybe people don't really understand that. What's your thoughts on that?
I completely agree, to be quite honest with you. And I think this is where, you know, most coaches you speak to are desperate to get up the ladder because they see taking the 16s is more important than, saying, taking the 8s or 9s, where, you know, Saul, from your experience of going around Europe, that isn't the case at many big clubs around Europe. They have their top coaches at the key age groups like 9 and 12. And I think, you know, the intensity that they operate from the moment they come through the door has to be to get them to that elite level. For me, you can't waste a minute. Every minute you waste is a chance of another boy at another club or another boy in another country being better than the player you've got. And I think players need to have, you know, embedded in their DNA to play at a tempo that means they can produce whatever skill that is, and pass, tactical skill, whatever it is, at the absolute ultimate highest tempo. If they can't do that, for me, they're going to come short. And I think, as the earlier example I gave, when you watch Spain in that game against Italy at under-21s the other day, however much pressure Italy put on them in that first 15, 20 minutes, Spain had a way of dealing with the ball technically and tactically well enough, however much pressure they were put under, where you look at a lot of teams like the English team, what have you, they could not play under that intense pressure. And for me, that comes from how they've been brought up through the academy system.
Do you think that as well? Do you think that's also to do with the philosophy, the methodology? What's the way they've been coached in terms of, you know, big emphasis on possession, that type of thing?
I think it goes back to the question that was asked. I think Ozzy Abanji, was the academy director at Brentford, said every session will be at this tempo, and it will be a higher tempo than the matches. And we had to condition the players to do that. And I think, you know, we didn't have access to that top players in the country, but we were able to compete. And I think we were able to compete because of the programme and the philosophy that was put in place at that club. I think if you put the same philosophy, same programme in the top clubs in this country, I don't think the likes of Spain will have better players than us. And that's where I believe we're probably just off at the moment. From the moment they walk in the door at under 7 to the moment they hit the first team at under 23, they should be training at an intensity that gets them ready for the rigours of playing at the top level.
And also you're thinking about, and also, that's when they need to be challenged as well, isn't it? Right? Working at that high level, that's when they're going to really make those gains.
Exactly right. And how you challenge them is up to the coach and their creativity, whether you do that with area size, player numbers, multiple balls, however you do it. I think that's where, us coaches earn our money, to be quite honest with you. But, for me, the tempo and being able to operate at high speed, even when they're 7 years old, is absolutely vital.
Okay, superb. Next question. So I'm wondering if you favour stopping the play often to give directions to players versus letting them play but setting rules in order to attain the set goal in a practice. Whether I'm looking to increase passing play or possession play within my team or any other aspect of team play. I coached U9s in Montreal, Canada.
I think it's a balance, to be quite honest with you. So I'll give you an example. If your monthly topics say defending, and listen, I believe that's the kind of things we should be teaching our younger players, and it's certainly the things that we've taught our younger players, you might stop it a bit more for two reasons. One, defending is a little bit more high tempo, and it is a bit more, lots of situations get thrown up. So you might stop it a little bit more and show them what they're going and everything like that. But what you might do in that kind of situation is have maybe a whole scenario where you let them play, see what happens, which I think is really, really important. And then you might do a lot of coaching, a lot of interventions, working on a particular theme, sticking to that theme and not being too complex, especially with the younger players. And then you might let them play again and then analyse it afterwards. So I think it is a balance. But what you can't do is just let the game run. And what you can't do is stop it every 2 seconds. You need to see what's happening and have a theme. So if you're working on one particular aspect, like, I don't know, getting in line with the ball, getting your back foot in line with the ball, getting side on, and you see something good, stop it, tell everyone that's great. If you see something bad on a few occasions, particularly the youngest, don't dig out the young lads. Say, look, there's 3 or 4 of you that have done this. You've got to make sure you do it like, Dave did it 2 minutes ago. And, it is a real balance. I don't think it's one way or the other way. I think you've got to know what your monthly topic is. So if you're doing loads of 1v1s, let them play 1v1s. You don't need to stop it every 2 minutes. Let them play and have an intervention when they're tired, because those high physical sessions will give you natural breaks anyway.
I suppose there's been a lot of talk about the current, inclination just to step back and let them play and, let the game do the work, as it were. A lot of feedback I've been getting from coaches around the country saying a lot of young foundation phase academy football's now looking like that.
Yeah, it's worrying, Saul. And as I said last time I spoke to you, I think we've got to be careful not to create a generation of coaches that don't know how to coach. I don't think people should be saying things for saying things' sakes. When I was a young coach, still now, to be honest with you, there's times where I'm not sure of the answer, so I'll go away and speak to people and find out what the answer is. And I just think, as I said earlier, you can't be the one that talks all the time, but you can't be the guy that just sits on the side, says absolutely nothing, and only talks to players during the break. I think part of our job is to inspire the players and to help the players through the game. And football, there's enough natural breaks to help. Even if you pull a player off the pitch, just come and have a little chat with them on the sideline. I honestly believe what difference. It's the development of the players is more important than anything else at these ages. And if that means you're playing 6v6 and you've got to play with 5 players for 30 seconds, again, what difference?
What's your thoughts? This is just going on another tangent. What's your thoughts on getting some of the boys into a game and then pulling a couple or one player out or 2 players out and working with them individually?
Actually, during a game.
So say like you're in a training, so you've got a training session and you might say you're playing a game, you've got a 6v6 going on or whatever, and just pull a couple of players out or one player out and work with him individually while the other boys are still playing. I
think if you got, it depends what you've done. If you've had your session, they're playing their game, I like to let them play. You might pull them off, as I just said, like, 10 seconds, hey, we've been working on, 1v1s. You've got that player there, you could have gone around him, think about how you can make your space and then send him back on his way. But for me, when they're playing their game, let them play their game and just pull out little bits of individual information and let them be a bit freer. I think that's where you've got to just be a little bit careful of doing too much, because you've probably had your session, you've given all your information, let them play and only pull them off if you can see something that they're not quite getting right on a consistent basis. Or they've done something right and you say, hey, excellent.
Exactly. What I'm trying to say is that, say you want to work with some players individually. So like, you got a team. So obviously I agree with you that the end, that part of the session really is, sacrilege. You've got to let them play. What's some strategies for coaches to, say if they've got a player who they want to work with individually a little bit and they've still, maybe they only coach there. What are the strategies that they can do to try and get into that player individually, maybe, and get that important time? Because a lot of feedback I get as a individual coach from parents from all different academies saying they don't do a lot of individual technical work or individual work for that player's unique needs. So, what some strategies coaches can use to get that individual time with the player while still making everyone else's working?
Yeah, I wouldn't do it during why they're playing their games or something like that. For me, that's probably because they're not doing the right technical stuff at the beginning of the sessions. or setting up some. We've introduced technical days where we're just working on certain technical aspects, because there's never a scenario where you've got one player that is the only player that needs that technical work. You always have a group of players that, even with the older boys, that need to be better at heading or whatever. So you just incorporate that into what you're doing in your technical work. For me, that just says that the work, when you are doing your technical work, isn't at the level it needs to be to meet that individual needs, because you should be designing your sessions around the individuals and then incorporating it in the collective, if that makes sense.
Yep, lovely. So what's this sort of links to the previous question? What's your thoughts on constant practices that help with triggers and then into small-sided games, which leads to varied and random practices?
I think, the varied and random is key, because that's the game. But you have to learn your basics as well. So you might do a constant practice where, you're just continually receiving it on your back foot or checking your shoulder or whatever, or constantly going 1v1 over a cone to practice a certain couple of skills. And then you let them go free and see how they get on in the random practice. You might be working on a single or double scissor over a cone. Repeat, get the scissor right, make sure their foot's in the right position, hips, blah, everything like that. And then in the game, they might be doing the scissor a bit too early or a bit too late. And then you can start talking about the variables of what the defender's doing. The defender might drop his weight too much on one side and you could exploit the other side, whatever that could be. And I think that's where both have an absolutely fundamental part. And then how you then as a coach interact with that player to help them understand what they're doing well, what they're doing poorly, is the skill of the coach for me.
Okay, it's next question. Hi, I coach under 10s and struggle to get them to appreciate positioning. Am I expecting too much? Any advice?
No. And advice I give people ask me this question all the time, actually. So, some of my mates might be taking a local under 7s team or something like that. And for me, very, very simple practices like the balance game. So for me, you've got a 4v4, you have a halfway line, and you say you always need a defender. Or you always need a defender and an attacker, otherwise you lose 5 goals. Something like that can be the most simple, basic scenario. You don't need to put 400 cones down, you don't need a plethora of rules, and the players get it, because only a certain times where if you put a really harsh one, like you lose 5 goals, they will only do it once, and then they'll start moaning at each other, making sure they're in the right place. So I think once you get the fundamentals of always having someone near the back or someone near the front of the pitch, straight away you spread everyone out and they start understanding the positional play. What you've got to watch with that is the boy that always stands at the back. So I
think that's well. I use that game a lot as well. I think it's really good just to also getting players to just play with their heads up. So they're all looking around to start to build a bit of awareness about, like say, defending and attacking. So that's what I used to do, the 8s and the 9s. That'd be the great introduction to defending, because that way, you make sure everyone's got their heads up, everyone's looking, like say, they've got balance and, they've got a bit of awareness about what's around them.
Exactly right, Saul. And I think it's a good empty and filling game as well. And, we punish the teams that, keep the same player at the back. We want the player to receive it if he's got space to burst forward, if he plays it forward to run forward, and then someone else just covers him. And I think, when people talk about what Ajax were able to achieve, particularly, when I think 10, 15 years ago with the intelligence of their play, when you speak to the coaches, it was just really simple games like that, but coached very, very well, that encourage the players to do those kind of things. And then it naturally comes out in the game, because a player run forward and the player recover, because they just know that's what they've got to do. So I think that's a really simple way, particularly with the younger players, to get them to start understanding the importance of balance and positioning.
So coming on to the next question, this links in quite nicely. So with such an emphasis on creative players being produced, are coaches ignoring limiting defensive development?
I think as a general comment, I think that's correct. I never forget when we was at Brentford, we always had a defensive month. We had 3 defensive months a year on rotation. And one of the assistant first team managers at the time, I won't embarrass them who they are, pulled us and said, "It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen, the fact you're teaching the boys defending." And that was actually the comment that was made. And for us, very much, we knew if we could improve the players defensively, 1, it's a massively important part of the game, but 2, it meant the defending was better, so the attacking had to be better. And I think one leads on to another. And, you look at Messi, he's one of the best defenders. He's an incredible defender, wins the ball back so much. You look how Neymar's improved since he's been at Barcelona at that aspect of his game. And, it's just a fundamental of the game that I think is really, really neglected. And we try and teach it at a late age, and it's one of those ones, it's just like attacking. If it's not ingrained, it's quite hard to teach at an older age, in my opinion.
I think I'll be honest, when I was younger and more an idealist, just focusing on the 1v1 when I first started out, I really didn't agree with that much about defending either. But then I did soon realise that the 1v1 play from my attackers became much better, much more effective when the defenders were improved as well, and that fed into the game. So yeah, I agree. It's an important bit. It's a really important part of 1v1. Do you think there's a case that maybe with our recruitment as well, we're maybe not noticing those players with that defensive instinct, that hunger, who sometimes maybe get missed out for the more maybe the big athletic kid or the bit more with the silky skills or that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think so, because a lot of the time the big kid gets put at the back because he's big. Where the boy that's a clever defender, he's just always a bit small. He's never going to be a centre half and all that lot. And they're the kind of comments that you hear, or he's not quick enough to be a right back or whatever. And I think what's important when you see those players with those real defensive qualities is you don't just stick them at the back all the time. You put them in midfield, because being a good defender in midfield is just as important as anywhere else. And I think it's a skill. I think it's a skill, and you see players that are just naturally good at being able to read the game and win the ball, or show great desire to go and want to win the ball. And for me, they're players that you really work with, really harness, particularly if you can get them at a young age, because it gives you time to be able to get them to the technical level you want. Because great desire, great ability to defend, for me, is as an important skill as it is kicking the ball in the net.
So, in England, do you think we're getting kids into academies too soon?
Certainly not. I think the idea of getting them early, being able to teach them correctly, I think is absolutely vital. You look at any top sport, the younger you get these players, in any sport, whether it's dancing, whether it's diving, whether it's tennis, whatever kind of thing, the younger you get them, the more chance you've got, because there's a real important window really between 6 and 9, and then between the 9 and 12, and you miss that. I know the likes of Jamie Vardy have come through and all that lot, but what would it been like if he had been identified at a proper early age, nurtured properly, and then taken all the way through with the desire level he shows and everything like that? And for me, it's not the fact that they're in too early, it's the content in which they're taught is probably where it's wrong in certain clubs. Some clubs are doing a great job.
This is exactly what my argument is, that people say this a lot, throw it around, and I say, well, what would you rather them do? Down and playing, on the muddy pitch with the Sunday League team, or if you got them actually at a world class facility with top coaches, with a really good, top quality technical program, which is fun, they're enjoying, they're buzzing off it. They're sure this is the right thing. Like you say, it's like for some reason when it comes to football, people say they shouldn't do this and that, whereas you look at young gymnasts and ballerinas and every other sport, young tennis players, they're putting the hours in and they're improving, and they're on their road to become world class, but for some reason, it's this if you talk about young players doing that in football, it's they're not allowed to. It's something on the road to ruin or something like that.
Because I think it's what people have seen, and the fact that I think even from a very young, I've seen it even at under 8 during this season. Teams are set up not to lose, and it's frightening, really, and that's where it is wrong. There is absolutely no point a boy being brought in or a young girl being brought in to a club where they're just set up to be safe, because they're not going to ultimately progress. If you can, as you say, bring them in with great facilities, great coaches, great support staff, and in an environment which is highly technical, and it's the best against the best, and it's a fierce competition, the kids absolutely love it, the progress will be absolutely frightening. So I think it's not the fact that they're in early, I think it's a good thing, but I think it's how you manage the players, the parents, and everything around it that is the bit you've got to get right, because if you get it wrong, then yes, it can be a real negative.
So leading on to our next question quite nicely then, is there a danger of overcoaching in the foundation phase, which may result in young players losing their spontaneity and creativity?
Yes and no. I think, there's a room for working with the players. I think it's a misconception that you just let them get on with it. We work very hard with the players at the young ages, but it's a balance that's absolutely key. And it depends on your monthly topic. It depends what level the players are at, and it depends on the situation. And ultimately, Saul, as well, I think one of the key things is it depends on the knowledge level of the coach. So when I was 16 and I started coaching, I could not have given the technical detail to a player that I can give now, even at under 8. So if you're not sure as a coach, you need to find out. You need to make sure it's the right detail. Find out from reputable people that have the experience, not a guy on Twitter that's been doing it 14 minutes. And make sure that the information you're giving is going to help that player. It's not a guess, or you're just thinking, I better say something, otherwise I'm not going to look like a good coach.
Well, I suppose as well, it's very in vogue as well for people to say, oh yeah, he's so good, such a good player. He came into academy system late. Oh, he had all that time on the park and all this and that. Where they're now failing to recognise all these young, fantastic. Look at all these. Look at the 17s and the 19s and the 20s who have had such success in the world football recently. Yeah, some of them came in late. A lot of them came in very early as well. A lot of them came very good, top quality technical coaching from a young age to give them that real good technical base to go on. This really frustrates me as well, is that looking at it and looking at where the courses are heading. It's like, why don't they have a look at some of the players coming through these systems that are actually on their own doorstep and say, look, wow, what are these clubs doing? Maybe we should actually have a look at these clubs and say, look, this is actually good practice. These guys are actually producing players from a young age.
Yeah, exactly right. But I think the reason that probably doesn't happen, Saul, is because people judge their youth academies by winning trophies still, like whether it's the FA Youth Cup or winning tournaments abroad or whatever. Ultimately, it's players that can go and make a difference in the youth team. And, there was a group when I was at Arsenal the previous time that went through their academy life unbeaten. No one touched them. And there's one player playing in the Championship out of that team. And I think that just says it all, really, where a team that might have been getting beat a little bit more than the others, maybe losing 50% of their games, have produced over 8 pros, and 4 of them are in the Premiership. So I just still think it's the safe culture and people being a bit too paranoid about potentially losing games. And you even saw that at the under-21s, where you look at the 17s and that, I think they played with a little bit more freedom. I think they've got good players, don't get me wrong. There is a few over-maturated players as well, but they've got good players. Where the 21s played with a fear. And, I think that was really, really evident, particularly in the game against Germany the other night.
Interesting. So in an ideal world, how would you structure a foundation phase session for 12 players?
It's just highly technical, get the players to enjoy working really, really hard. I think one of the misconceptions, if they're not running around laughing, then it's wrong. I think they've got to enjoy hard work, enjoy, failing, and get them to understand that failure is actually quite a good thing, and to improve. And for me, it's highly technical, particularly at the beginning with ball each stuff, lots of 1v1 domination and stuff like that. And then depending on whatever your monthly topic is, work on some possession based with that monthly topic, work on some technical based with that monthly topic, and then get it into game situations and see how the players get on.
I think you go, sorry to interrupt you, mate. It's just goes back to that question earlier, I think, about intensity, and that's for me. If I look in at a good academy session, it's that all the boys are really at it. It's a good intensity. It's really challenging. The tempo's high. Obviously, it may change in that, but everyone's really at it, 100%. Everyone's really going for it, and that intensity's and the pace of the session is really important for me. I'm not just talking about pace of football in terms of them playing 100 miles an hour. I'm talking about they're exerting themselves 100 miles an hour. They're giving it their all. They're really pushing themselves to the limits, and that's the challenge, I think, for coaches at that high level, is to really, that's like you said earlier, every session counts. How can you really make sure this session as well, especially if it's raining on this and that, you're getting that 100% out of the players, are really pushing themselves to really get those outcomes.
No, I agree. So, and the best thing Chris Ramsey ever said to me when I was 18 was, the neater the session looks, the worse job you're doing. And I think the problem is, in this day and age where image seems to be everything, whether it's what you see on TV and all that lot, I really think there's a fear amongst a lot of coaches that if it doesn't look clean, if the player's not peeling off and taking it on his back foot and spraying a 40-yard pass perfectly and all that lot, they feel that's a reflection on them. And for me, when I look at one of my sessions, if it's clean, I've had a mare. Because if it's completely clean for a prolonged period of time, I haven't challenged the players well enough.
So how do you get the kids to practice like they would do in a real game? That's another question which sort of leads into that.
So difficult. So difficult. I mean, the world's a very different world now. Kids can't just go on their own at 10 o'clock, over the park and stuff like that. Unfortunately, we are in the world we're in. And I think all you can do is give them challenges to do away from, the club. I think the technical stuff, you've got to get them to love working on the technical elements. And, Alex Iwobi's a great example of that, where he didn't come into the under-9 season as the best player. But if you showed him something, he would go away and practice it. Marcus Edwards was the same. Josh Onomar was the same. Harry Winks would be the same. All those kind of players would go away and try it. And they might not be able to do it in the game. And, I think you've got to try and get into the players' heads to understand that practice is so important for them to be better players. The boys that don't practice ultimately will come up short. But I said to the parents at the beginning of the season this year was you can't force the boy into the garden to practice. If you're doing that, then ultimately they're not going to want to do it. You've got to help them, support them and everything like that. But if you're literally throwing them out in the garden, locking the door and saying, go and do a load of kick-ups, for me, they've got to want to practice.
I suppose as well as that, practice in the sessions as well, that intensity as well we talked about, is that I always like to have element of competition in every session. So always when you're finishing on a small sided games, it's like a competition in terms of winners and losers. So every session you have that, every game counts. Everyone, if you win the game, you move up. You lose the game, move down. That type of thing. So that added element of competition in every session really gives that intensity. So everyone, there's, everyone wants to win every single one. There's something always at stake. I think that's really important as well to even at the foundation phase have that intensity and that level of competition in the thing, because that's what boys in. They know each other. They love to challenge themselves and go at each other and win and get the winner and that sort of thing. Also helps obviously dealing, not only about winning, it's about losing as well. So, dealing with losing and being disappointed as well.
No, I agree. But what you've got to watch in those scenarios is that they don't then win in the incorrect manner, because what you can't do is then let their development suffer. So, you see a lot of games where they start, you say, right, losers pick up the equipment and they all start shilling it in the corner. That's no good. But then you can't have them just rolling it out the back every time, because that's not the game. So I think, this is important when you have a philosophy and you have your monthly topics, you have your weekly topics and what you're working on in your sessions and everything like that. They need to win doing what you've taught them. What they can't do is start winning a way that's not going to help their development. And I think that's, again, the job of the coach, and where the balance is and how you do that within your sessions is, as I say, where we earn our money, really.
Yeah, that's just about managing the group, isn't it? Managing the group, and, you obviously know your own group, don't you? So
exactly right.
What are you looking for when you're scouting the younger players from 5 to 11? Traits, tendencies, techniques, etc.?
There's lots of things, Saul, really. I think you've got to be careful not to look for the same thing. For me, the best groups I've taken are groups that are, a balance, whether it's physically or whatever. But certainly the biggest thing that I look for is, players that have a desire for the game is important. Intelligence, I think, is absolutely important. And I think the boys that will stick out are those boys that have that natural ability with a ball. I think, when going back to what I said right at the beginning about over-maturated players and how many of them that dominate games at nines actually become top players, I think you look at those players that are so, show a natural affiliation with the ball. The clubs that have been patient with those type of players have produced top players. And I think, that's the overriding thing that I would always look. If you see that player, no matter how small he is, no matter how under-maturated, he can handle a ball well and shows good intelligence with it, stick with them, because they've got a chance.
What about looking at how do you recognise players, young players who come in who've maybe, their training load, their training, the amount of hours they've done is much higher than other players, and how do you recognise the latecomers and those who haven't done as much? Because obviously we're talking about 6 or 7 or 7, 8-year-olds coming in. And there could be wildly different amounts of hours trained from players. So you've got to try and recognise, those players who maybe are going to be the late developers in terms of they haven't trained as much as the other guys.
It is so important, Saul. And we've had this conversation a lot this year. I'm very lucky where I am at the moment. We've probably got the best recruitment team in the country. And, when the players come in, we have an idea about their football history. And I think it is so important because, with the likes of the stuff that, you guys brilliantly do, players have a lot of access to 1v1 sessions with, skilled people and stuff like that. And particularly, the boys that come from more affluent families, you find that they've actually had a really in-depth football education ever since they maybe been 2 or 3. And you've got to be really careful that another boy might come in who's played no structured football whatsoever. We had it with a goalkeeper this year, and you cannot judge it on that merit. You need to see how the player develops. And if you do not understand the football history or not sure, coaches need to spend the time with the recruitment staff and the parents to understand what that boy has done over the period of time that's led him to the place that he is now. Because for me, unless you understand that, you can't make a judgment, no matter whether they're 16 or whether they're 8. We had a player at Brentford that came in at 15 who just was so smooth technically. He couldn't do something. You showed it to him once and he could do it. And we were like, wow. He had never been at an academy or anything like that. When we drilled down to it, he was from a private school and did huge amounts of futsal, lots of curver. So he had done a lot of technical based stuff. So he could pick things up quite quickly. And we needed to understand that before we made a judgment call on it, if that makes sense. So I think coaches have just got to do their homework a little bit.
I think as well, I can testify to that. I remember, being a coach, 9s, 10s or 11s, a player comes in, well, 2 players come in. One player obviously hits the ground running, and the other one just takes time. And like you say, so especially when you're dealing with trialists who've been at other academies, like you say, who played academy football, they know the tempo a little bit. They maybe haven't played at a club at that level, and then the player comes straight in from grassroots, who's a bit like in a rabbit in the headlights and is a bit like overwhelmed about it. But you just need to see that couple of things. I remember when we signed Tashan Oakley-Booth at Spurs. That took a long process for him, but he did come. He was like a street player, had come in and he was, it did take a while to make a decision, but we made a decision on him. And look at the player he turned out to, and he really accelerated very quickly once he bedded into academy football. So it's really it's a real challenge, isn't it, for coaches and recruitment staff to see the different players, where they come from, the ones who you see something in it, and I suppose it's about deciding how much time you're going to give them, and how many players you can have in a group is the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. And listen, exactly what you said is, I take it back to when I was 21, walking through the door at Arsenal, a trialist would come in who wasn't at the same level as the other players, and I'll be saying to the recruit, he's miles off. Why are you bringing him in? And it's like, I think it's an experience one as well, that you just learn that, you need to give them time. If they show something, give them time, see how they go. Because at the end of the day, even if you give them a season, I don't see what you're losing by giving them a season to see what they can do and whether they can improve and everything like that. If you've got 14 players and you've got 15, you just got to manage it different. With the resources, particularly the top clubs have got now, being able to build games programs across weekends and that, you can manage it with a wider base. And I think that's why that wider base is so important, because if you can see something in a boy, give them time, see how they go, give them time to develop, support them as well as you support the players that are perceived in the top quartile, and just you might have a better player on your hand than you thought you might have done at the beginning.
I suppose as well, that's the thing, is the importance of having experienced members of staff within the foundation phase as well, rather than it being the starting point for coaches on their journey, as it often is, rather having people who've been there, done it, and seen player development cycle and understand what to look for. I think that's could be key for clubs, right?
I agree completely. And also you've got to think about how you're going to produce your next generation of coaches, because if your next gen of coaches are only coaching with people of very similar experience levels to them, I don't see how you're going to get them to operate at the level you're going to. I mean, Ozzy was insistent at this at Brentford. I would work with the 8s, or people like Stuart English would work with the 8s on a regular basis with some of the younger coaches and stuff like that. So we were just trying to, one, make sure experienced people were around to help the players, but also experienced people were around to help the coaches become better coaches as well. And I think that's important. But again, linking back to an early point, all of us need to lose our egos and understand that we can learn off everyone. And someone that's been in the game 20 years, whether you've done 2 or 3 years, you need to milk them for every bit of knowledge they've got, because they've gone through an experience that when you're a younger coach you haven't. Last time I spoke to you, I said exactly the same. When Roy Massey talked to me at Arsenal about saying you need to see 2 or 3 cycles go through before you start understanding this at the level that he understood it. And when I was 21, I thought, you're talking rubbish, Roy. You're just saying that because I'm young and whatever. He's 100% right. 100% right. And I think, you can only make better decisions on players with experienced people around you to make those decisions.
Okay, good. So how many hours a week should each age group train as a team and as individually? What are the Cat 1 boys required to do?
I think irrespective of what the Cat 1 boy, everyone does 90-minute sessions now. But for me, I think, this is where I think sports science play a really important part. And maybe a lot of places are underutilised, because for me, I think the players should do 2 hours. I think there's a sports science element, particularly at the younger ages, they shouldn't be using, dumbbells and that, but working on their sway movements or, their dynamic ability or whatever it is. But for me, you can imagine if every player's coming in, spending half hour on pre-ab stuff, movement stuff and whatever, then going into a 90-minute, football-based session, I think that for me would be the ideal. And training 3 times a week, obviously as they get older, starting doing day release and what have you, and playing at the weekends is absolutely fine. I think one of the misconceptions is that, if the boys are playing on Sunday, they shouldn't train for too long on a Saturday. I'll go back to the example of Alex Iwobi's age group, which, there's over 11 pros out of that age group when they were under 9s now. And we used to train for like 2 hours. 2.5 hours on a Saturday, which might have been a little bit too much, and then they would go out on a Sunday, look fresh as possible and absolutely murder everyone. And not murder everyone through their physical domination, through dominating the ball, 1v1, passing the ball. I think as I went back, every minute counts for me. And I think working with the sports science staff, the physio staff, managing the players' loads, you can create a really creative program that gets players to a technical level that can compete and if not excel abroad, which I think is probably where we're coming up a bit short now. Just doing 90 minutes, including the sports science elements, I think is not going to get us to the technical level we need to be at.
Well, I remember doing the old youth coaches license many years ago at Kiel with John Allpress and Noddy Holder, and actually they were actually saying, maybe can we do more hours at that point before we went under this new thing where, God forbid, you train lots of football. Is that they actually recommend you should do more football, you should do more hours, and the question is obviously just have you got the body for football. So the question is obviously how much is too much, how much is not enough. Obviously, like we've talked about previously, you're encouraging people to do other sports, but as sports scientists say, there's a clear correlation between the amount of hours you're doing and the end game of where you're going to end up as a footballer. So, like I say, if you are gifted and talented in that sport, like if you are a ballerina or a young gymnast or a young tennis player, you've got to if you want to be the top level, we're talking about an elite, international, world-class player, you have to put the hours in. And that's the problem, is this fallacy now, thinking that, you can just turn up to your academy, do your 3 sessions, 90 minutes, and then go home and put your feet up and play PlayStation, and then that's going to be enough.
Yeah, it's no chance. And, I think what worked really well at Brentford was we had a magnificent set of, physio and sports science staff, led by Neil Gregg and the guys, that we worked so closely that we made sure that the players' loads were managed in the correct way. It could be that they've had a really heavy week or the pitches are really heavy, and we would adjust the program accordingly. But we were very much of the opinion that you look at top-level sport now, physically you have to be so robust to deal with the rigours of the Premiership, the Championship, League 1, 2. And I think if we're not putting the players in those situations through their academy development, I think they're either going to break physically, break technically, but certainly they're not going to be at the level we want. You've got to push the players to that limit and beyond in the right way, and work with a physio and sports science staff to manage that, because if you're physically not ready, it ain't going to happen for you. And I think that's why quite a lot of players break at those younger ages when they hit the first team. I just think they're physically not prepared.
So another question now. So for U9 group playing 7v7, is there a particular formation you see that has success? We play 1-1-3-2. So I assume you're saying he plays a keeper, 1 at the back, 3 in the middle, 2 up front.
I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer. I think the Belgium FA got this right, where they got the boys in their clubs to play a lot of different formations. If we were playing 7-a-side, I would usually pick a 1, 3-1-1 or so, whatever kind of thing. But I don't like it always sticking 2 at the back. because I think it's a mindset thing with the players. I think if you almost go one with a couple in midfield, 2 wide players and a forward, I think what you end up finding is you get a rotation between the defender, the midfielders, the striker, the midfielder. The wide players get to understand, what to do in possession, what to do out of possession. I think that probably gives you the most outcomes. But I would move it around.
I think that this guy who says he plays 1-1-3-2. My thing would be that exactly that. Is there enough rotation? So obviously we always play a classic 2-3-2, 2-3-1 with 2 at the back. The same thing for me. There wasn't enough movement, so we actually started playing a 3-2-1, which I was quite cynical about because I thought actually that's going to be defensive, but actually it turned out to be really attacking because with 3 at the back, you always got one joining in, so you got rotation naturally up the side, and you got runners coming from deep out wide, but also it gave the midfielder someone the opportunity to play in the middle with someone. That was a real benefit. So you got 2 in midfield, so which I think was real good for about developing, rotation in the middle and developing quality midfield play. And obviously, then one of the defenders can join into midfield, and the other midfielder drop out. And I think that's key for we're talking about elite level. Playing elite level football at a young age, that idea about balance we talked about, that rotation, is that you don't want to be playing a game, in my opinion, you don't want to be playing a game when you've got someone who's just stuck in that one position, or you've got a defender who's at the back and he defends there the whole game. I think that's the worst thing possibly you can do, and that just thing maybe if you want to win a game, but it's all about movement, rotation, making players play with their head up. I think there you're going to get real quality outcomes if you've got constant movement and rotation in those positions.
No, I agree. I had a player this year that his father come up to me and said, he gets the ball and you tell him when he's got space to drive into midfield, but if he loses it, there's no one covering, and he's worried that that's his fault. I said, it's not his fault, that's everyone else's fault. And it goes back to my point about doing things like the balance game. The boys will learn through putting them in that environment. And how you dress up your formation is depending on the players. You just said you played 3-2-1, where I would dress it up 1-3-1-1 or something like that, so the players think it's a little bit more attacking. But I also think it's not just as important as in midfield, but also with the attackers. At Brentford, with the older age groups, we always played two up front because players come into you and say, I'm a 10. What does that mean? Because in 5 years' time, people might not play with a 10. So I think it's about creating a formation that gives a freedom to really. It's wherever the players end up, they end up, as long as the formation kind of remains where it needs to be. So I think the guy who's asked the question, I think he's not too far off, but I would mix it up. But I would mix it up higher up the pitch and not further down the pitch, if that makes sense. And
so now moving on to planning. Bucky, how long in advance do you plan? Tell us a little bit about your technical periodisation. Any recommendations on that front? So for this season, we sat down in August and planned out the entire season. So we planned out what the monthly topic was, what then the weekly topics would be of that, and then what the technical topics would be of that. So, something like, defending, we would do a lot of going over players, another defending month, we'd do a lot of going around players or whatever. And we broke it down so we knew exactly what we were going to work on, what week, what month, etc., etc. And then as we went through the year, we tweaked it every time because we basically had three syllabus months and then kept rotating them around. And every time we finished a month, a bit like what we did at Brentford, we did an in-depth analysis of how that month went, what was good, bad and indifferent. And then when that next one come up, we had already planned, reviewed and implemented kind of the changes we would make. What we did very well at Brentford was at the end of every month, we had that review as a collective. And then the senior staff went away and then reviewed it and changed it, shared it with people. We all had a conversation. And then when that month came back around, the briefing of that month would then highlight the changes that we're going to make on the results of the previous month, if the previous kind of time we did it, if that makes sense. That's very much what we incorporate now. So I think right at the beginning of the season, particularly when you're talking about professional football clubs, you need to do that planning and have a clear plan for the entire year that's linked to your philosophy, so you know exactly what you're doing. Communicate that to the coaches. Make sure your training is, your training of the coaches is in line with that, and that you've got the caliber of people to be able to deliver it. And what about bits like reactive stuff, or stuff that happens in a game, like you just want to address and that sort of thing? How do you fit that into that scheme?
The worst thing I ever hear is, we're going to work on not getting done by a ball over the top because we lost 2 goals to that at the weekend. I think particularly at the younger age groups, you've got to stick with your philosophy, do what you've got to do. You might have conversations with individuals as you're going and all that lot, but what you can't do is then escape from your program and what your syllabus of what you're doing just because of something that's happened in a match. What you've got to do is analyse it. So say it's a defensive issue. If you're in an attacking month, you need to keep going with what you're going and just make sure that in your defensive months you've got it adequately covered. And, particularly at the Cat 1 clubs, you've got the video analysis and everything like that to show the players. And then, I'm talking about obviously the younger age groups here. With the older players, you can do it slightly differently. But you just wait, speak to them, as I say, after the game. But what you can't do then on the Monday, where you were meant to be working on, attacking play in the final third, is now dropping off when there's no pressure on the ball, if you know what I mean. You've got to be really careful about that.
I think that's as well. That's when you've got to be brave, and I suppose that's if you've got the backing of your management. So I remember working under Chris as well, Chris Ramsey at Spurs. You say, Sunday's just another training session, and you don't want to see the pre-game forward. So that's you've got to be brave and say, yeah, well, we kept trying to play out the back. We conceded several goals for playing out from the back, and that's just the thing you got to say. Okay, well, and that's just part of your philosophy, being brave, explaining that to the parents and saying to the boys, that's obviously that happens, but we got to keep on going. That's not our priority at the moment. But I suppose that can be tricky. I remember that that changing quickly when Chris left, and that's that's obviously that's just up to people's opinion, isn't it? I suppose you just got to go from what you're getting from upstairs.
It's the philosophy of the club, and at the end of the day, you join a club, the philosophy of that club and the people who are in charge, you either buy into what they're doing and do what you've got to do, or you don't buy in, and then ultimately you've got a decision to make whether you should be at another football club. But for me, I think going back to one of the previous questions about Brentford, we had a clear philosophy. We knew what our monthly topics were. We knew what Ozzy wanted from us all, and we knew, we had a very experienced staff to deal with the players. And I think, what happened at the weekend wouldn't then change fundamentally what we would then go do in the week. And I think you're right in what, Chris says, and we were lucky to be, brought up in that kind of environment. But, I do feel that, for some of the younger coaches, they're put in that situation. And I think it's a difficult one for them. I really do think it's a difficult one for them, because they might be getting pressured from other people. Oh, God, you got beat 5-0 the weekend. That can't happen again. You hear comments like that. And, I remember as a young coach at Arsenal, we got absolutely murdered by West Ham one week. And one of the senior staff said, oh, you can't lose by that many goals. And it's like, oh, but... this is our philosophy. We were trying to do it. No. If that happens, you've got to, hit it a bit longer and all that. I'm thinking, at 9, is that right? That didn't sit quite right with me. And as I say, that's where it's different at 9 to when you're talking about 16, because at under 16, you could almost play in the first team. So different age groups have a different balance, but at the end of the day, it's the philosophy of the club. It's a tricky one, Saul, to be quite honest with you.
And tell us a little bit about how you organise the technical periodisation for your 1v1 work.
I do a lot of research, and I still am now, 22 years later, really, and looking at what players do, movement train. I've spent a lot of this year talking to some very, very good people about how players move, particularly sideways and backwards and stuff like that, and how I can, in my technical practices, improve players' movement and being able to change direction better and being able to feel the ball better and everything like that. And I think, how I structure my 1v1s practices is around that. I've started to move a lot more as well towards, once I know the boys have a fundamental technical base about looking at players, doing things depending on what they see in the game. Your first touch should be based on, where the space is, where the defender is, etc. like that. I think when I was a younger coach, I perhaps taught a lot of the technical stuff and not enough of the game awareness stuff, where now I think both is as important as each other. So, making sure they move right and the fundamentals are there is absolutely vital. And then getting them to understand how to utilise that in a match and getting feedback from them as well. I think one of the interesting things I noticed this year was to say to the player, why did you take a big touch there? Sometimes I might say, oh, I had a bad touch. And they thought, oh, I saw a bit of space behind him, so I thought I could get around it. It's quite interesting when you start talking to the players about why they do what they do in the game. And I think that starts adjusting your 1v1 practices. And I suppose to finish off, I think it's the variation of the scene setting with a 1v1 practice. So a lot of the 1v1 practice you see is ball gets played, guy takes him on. And I think, you need to look at, starting players with a bit of movement, players receiving the ball to the back of the defender, the back of the goal, maybe doing a quick inset play so the defender can get a little bit closer. I think the variety of the situation you can put them in the 1v1 practice, I'm setting aside here, learning the fundamentals of the skill is absolutely vital. And then see what they do, see what decisions they make. And I think you just talk to them about that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan at the moment of, if I'm going to work with a new group, I actually start with actually working with the ball to the back to pressure. And then maybe, so I call hazard work now, which used to call Zidane work, and then maybe move on to Ronaldo work after. Like I say, it's about variation, and obviously I like practices that have both of those elements. But I think now that you look at Hazard, the way he moves with the ball and moves defenders around, I think that's a lot more difficult way to dominate 1v1 when you're receiving with someone in your back and trying to shake them off, and almost like the rodeo, as it were. And I agree, it's saying that is about how players move and doing that. And this is why people don't understand the different outcomes, the multiple outcomes you get from doing ball mastery properly. With a ball is these movement outcomes, and you're faking one side to the other, you're turning one side, you're being able to explode sharply out of the turns. These are really massively important, outcomes you're getting from ball mastery when you do it properly, when you do it consistently, and these feed into it. So I think that's sometimes get lost in the argument when people saying, is it really, some people said, ball mastery is touches for touches sake, for instance.
Yeah, that's why England are where they are, Saul, to be quite honest with you. But to be honest with you, there's also things you see, particularly on the internet, of people that are doing 1v1 practices, but the players are being taught wrong, because I just don't think that people know the detail they need to know. As I say, I've been, I learned as a Curva coach when I was 16. That's how I started, and that's why I've had such an interest in 1v1 play and stuff. But I'm doing more research now, 22 years later, that is adapting my thinking, not fundamentally changing it, but thinking about how I teach the players. And I think, you need to have an in-depth knowledge to be able to get the right information across to these players. And it goes back to our earlier point about having the right experienced people at the right places within your club to be able to make sure the coaches are giving the correct detail. And it works hand in glove, I think, with, you get some top physio staff, top sports science staff that I've been able to have access to over the last couple of years. And, it really does make you think about how we're teaching these players and giving them the best possible opportunity to be an Iniesta, a Messi, Neymar, etc. But it doesn't happen by accident. There's a lot of variables, and like we were saying about having the back to player, having the going over player. Literally at the moment, how we do it is we've designed it so 1 month you'll do a lot of going around player, another month you'll do a lot of going over, and we'll stick to that for that month. And I think sticking to it for a prolonged period of time is important. What you shouldn't do is going around one session and then going over a next. You need to really drum home the fundamentals of what that skill acquisition is.
And this leads on to the next question quite nicely. What's your thoughts on the lack of content in terms of ball mastery and 1v1 in the FA's most recent courses?
It's a very difficult thing to coach, and I think there's a lack of understanding of it in the country, because I think people see passing and moving as more fundamental, important skills in this country. But for me, until the country embraces being able to be dynamic 1v1 player with great content within your coaching armory of being able to teach players to be good 1v1, I think there's always going to be a bit of a ceiling for how good we can actually get our players to. And I think there's a real opportunity for the football club that designs their syllabus around those kind of methodologies like Barcelona have, and like Dynamo Moscow and all those kind of clubs have done. I think they could, a club could really just dominate this country and produce some wonderful football players, because I think that the recruitment's there, I think the facilities are there, and we've got the players. We just need to produce the content and educate our coaches in a way that helps us produce those type of players. There's just not enough of those type of players in this country. It's as simple as that.
So you think it's a case of maybe looking and learning from established and successful academies are in Europe?
I think it's something like the academies that you've been to. So you look at Sporting Lisbon, they're slightly different now. But, back when they were producing Ronaldos and Quaresmas, they were absolutely, everything about their sessions was creating 1v1 creative players. And look at some of the wingers and 1v1 type players they created. And maybe they went too far down that way because that might have been to the detriment of other players. But I think for whatever reason, when people come back with practices, they seem to all be rondo-y based or very passy based and stuff like that. And the conversations I've had with the Barcelona staff isn't that. So it's strange, really, when you see what people come back and say, "Oh, Barcelona do this," or Atletico Madrid or Bilbao do this, or whatever kind of thing. Because for me, when I've gone abroad, when I've spoke to people, when I've played teams, the most outstanding attribute those top teams have had is their players dominate us 1v1. But saying that, I've taken teams abroad that have dominated other teams 1v1 because of the philosophy we've had in place. So, it just shows you if you've got the right philosophy, you can compete, and if not, win on those kind of merits.
Well, if one thing I've learned in the last few months, doing a lot of travelling and being lucky enough to do this podcast and speak to some of the best talent developers around the world, is that if you're looking for a common theme that runs through these things, it definitely is, ball mastery and 1v1 and, making and technical excellence, being the real key to elite talent development. And that's, I suppose, what we're talking about, isn't it? It's about, do we want to run our system as some sort of soccer school, or turn up laissez-faire, let's let the boys get on with it, or are we serious about trying to produce top level athletes? That's what we want, really, isn't it? Top level athletes who have the world class technique.
Exactly right. And
and look, just one caveat to that as well, and the other misconception saying that, but somehow this isn't fun. So because we're challenging players and they're working hard, they don't fun. That's a load of rubbish. Look at the players. The players I've had lucky enough to have the last 10 years, driving every session, they come out, they're buzzing because they are challenged. This fallacy that they've got to be walking around playing games and making up their own little silly games, it's rubbish. If you want an elite environment, it's about challenging them. They're having fun as well. And this is how you get in the outcomes.
And I think it's a real skill of the coach, and this is something that I haven't got right all the time, to be honest with you, Saul, is how you balance them to create an environment where it's intense, it's hard, but get the players to understand that it's there to help them and make it fun. And I think it's taken me a long time and a lot of mistakes to probably get myself to a level where I can now do that, whether I'm coaching an under-7 or whether I'm coaching an under-21 player. And I will still make mistakes now because it's a really difficult thing to do. And I think, the more that we create an environment where it is just like, having a laugh and everyone's running around laughing and all that lot, I just think we're going to be struggling. There's a time and place for those bits, but the players need to know when they cross the line, it's serious, it's hard, and they've got to love it. You asked Rory McIlroy what it was like when he was spending 6 hours a day, smacking a golf ball to the same area. He loved it. That's what he enjoyed. And I think, we've got to create footballers that enjoy those kind of things, because if we don't, ultimately they're going to be technically short.
Bucky, thanks very much for your time. It's been amazing. Appreciate it again, mate. And we'll hopefully speak to you soon.
No, pleasure, and I hope it's been useful. Thanks, Saul. Speak soon.
Thanks for tuning in to the MyPersonalFootballCoach.com Soccer Player Development Podcast. MyPersonalFootballCoach.com's Dynamic Ball Mastery Program is the world's leading online individual technical training program, proven and developed at the highest level in the English Premier League. Sign up now to train like the pros and take your game to the next level. Master the ball, master the game.